Many, many years ago, I had the privilege of leading another church prior to coming to lead Anthem. I was a much younger man in those days and truthfully quite insecure in my leadership. You know, it's one of those things where you're in your 20s and you're saying to God, I feel like the grace of leadership is upon me. I feel like I can go and lead a church. Come on, God, why are you delaying? Why are you delaying? And he says, okay, here we go. And he gives you a church, and then you think 2 months in, shucks, I'm not ready for this. How can you entrust people that you love into my hands as a shepherd? And it was Easter, and so Easter is normally a high time in the church life, and I was leading a church down the south coast, and so there would often be a lot of visitors because people from Johannesburg in particular would come down on holiday, and then family and friends would come on holiday because we lived in a beautiful part in Ramsgate. And so Easter was always a very full time for the church. And in the build-up to that, I had been kind of listening to a popular preacher of the day. He was an American, and he was quite brash. He seemed to be having a lot of success. And so I took one of his messages, and I started to prepare that message for the Easter Sunday. And so what was taking place over the weeks in the build-up to Easter was I was putting more of his words into me than what the Spirit of God was saying to me. And increasingly, I felt at unease for two reasons. As I was taking his content and putting it in me, I'm like, this is not me. I don't think I'm brash. Some of you may disagree, I hope not, but I don't think I'm brash. It's not me. But more than that, I felt the Spirit of God say to me, this is not the way Jesus should be represented. But there was something in me, in my insecurity as a 20-something-year-old leading another community on Easter with an opportunity for a whole bunch of people, and I just thought, I'm going to just silence that voice. I'm going to distance myself from that voice because this guy's having success. I'm going to go and I'm going to commit to this. And I preached that message that Easter. And about halfway through the message, I'm living with the shame in the back of my head going, Richard, you've absolutely messed this up. You have dishonored Jesus. You have dishonored the bride of Christ. You've dishonored even your own self. The message ended. I couldn't get out of there quick enough. And for the next couple of days, I lived in this incredible disappointment of myself as I had denied what the Spirit of God had been saying to me in the build-up to Easter. And then we had a local spa, and I was at the spa doing some shopping, and I bumped into an older gentleman who was part of the church. Well, let me say that I didn't bump into him. I saw him, and I purposely avoided him. And then he orchestrated to bump into me. And I was so embarrassed in that confrontation, in that engagement. And he looked at me, and he just said, he didn't even say, how are you? He just said, Rich, that wasn't you. We like the Richard that's led by the Spirit of God. Can we have that preacher this coming Sunday? And then he carried on. And I went home and I probably cried. I forget. It's kind of like a part of my memory that I try to block out. And but I remember that day, and I made a commitment to myself that day that I was never going to deny the Spirit of God and trying to distance him in preparation for a message. I would rather stand up here unprepared than to try and take something that's not me or represent God in a way that's not me or what he's doing in me. And so that distancing caused me to deny what he was wanting to do with me. It led to incredible disappointment. And then God very kindly, through an older gentleman in our church, redeemed me in that moment. He said, Rich, we like you. Can we have you? As an insecure preacher, new to pastoring a community, he said, no, we like that guy. That's the guy we want. Not the one that was on the stage this past Easter. So today I want to just talk about what it means to follow Jesus in one aspect. And so we've been doing the last couple of weeks, we've just been looking at some life lessons from people. So the last 2 weeks we did Daniel, so that statement of 10 times better. As Daniel followed God, the outcome was 10 times better in all matters of wisdom and understanding. And today we're going to look at an aspect of Peter's life, the guy that got to walk with Jesus. And we're going to look at something, at an incident that happened, and what it caused Peter, and what we can learn from it, and then what Jesus did about it. So we're going to go to Luke chapter 22, verses 54 to 62. It says this. Then seizing him, this is Jesus. So guys have come, and where we are in the story is Jesus is about to be taken away, going to go through a trial, which is going to end up in his crucifixion. Okay, so that's where we are in the story of Jesus. Then seizing him, Jesus, they led him away and took him into the house of the high priest. Note these words. Peter followed at a distance. When some there had kindled a fire in the middle of the courtyard and had sat down together, Peter sat down with them. A servant girl saw him seated there in the firelight, and she looked closely at him and said, "This man was with him." But he denied it. "Woman, I don't know him," he said. A little later, someone else saw him and said, "You're one of them." "Man, I am not," Peter replied. And about an hour later, another asserted, "Certainly this fellow was with him, for he is a Galilean." Peter replied, "Man, I don't know what you're talking about." And just as he was speaking, the rooster crowed. Jesus, the Lord, turned and looked at Peter. Peter remembered the word the Lord had spoken to him. "Before the rooster crows today, you will disown me 3 times. And he went outside and he wept bitterly. There's this moment where Peter has to make a decision because the person that he's following is being taken off ultimately to his crucifixion. And in this moment, Peter's confronted with so many things. He's confronted with his own insecurity, his own security. Am I safe with these people? He's standing around a fire with some people. They start to accuse him of being with him. Was he going to end up being crucified along with Jesus? And so suddenly he had to decide that. He was around a fire with a group of people, and he wanted to kind of say, well, can I fit in with these guys? But to fit in with these guys means I need to deny Jesus, who's up there being on trial by the high priest. And then he gets asked directly, and then he makes this decision to deny Jesus. This Jesus who's called him out of fishing, who's walked with him for 3 years, who he has loved, and Jesus has loved him, and he has witnessed miracles. He's seen water turn into wine. He's seen sick people made well. He's seen his own mother be made well by Jesus. And yet in a moment of insecurity, he's able to deny Jesus. We're not going to criticize Peter in this moment because I think he reflects all of us at some point in time. When our master causes other people to start putting some pressure on us, what do? But this moment, what was Peter's first misstep in this moment? It says in the scriptures, Peter followed at a distance. So for the first time in 3 years, Peter was probably at a distance from Jesus. For 3 years, he had been walking, and he had been holding close. He was probably jostling with all the other disciples to be walking closest to Jesus. But in this moment, he was at a distance to Jesus because his personal security was at risk. And so what we can learn from Peter's life, and we're going to just apply it to ours for a moment, and this could get a little bit anar in our hearts as the scriptures kind of maybe confront some things in us. It's okay because we love each other here, and most importantly, Jesus loves us. But the first thing that we see here is that distance leads to denial. Distance leads to denial. And we see Peter deny Jesus, deny 2 things. The first is this. Because the person says he was with him, with Jesus. And so the first denial is he denies knowing Jesus. a little bit of distance, in a crowd that are rebellious against you, that don't choose Jesus. Suddenly he wants to belong in this crowd, or at least he doesn't want to be outcast from this crowd. And he's led into this place. And so question, where do we look for our own safety? Because the reality is, following Jesus is following him into death. But the beauty is, Jesus is the only one that knows his way through death into life. No one else does. But so often in our own mindsets, I'm getting ahead of myself here for the message, but that's okay. So often what we do is we see death, we don't see the life on the other side of it. And so we focus on what's temporary, not on what's eternal. And then we start to feel insecure. I don't want death. I don't want to follow Jesus to my death. No, Jesus is the one that knows how to take you through it. Death is coming to all men. Every single one of us. We are destined to die. But in Jesus, life. Some questions. Have you ever felt like you can't claim to know Jesus? Have you ever been in a situation with a group of people where you feel outnumbered and you feel like if you were to say, hey, I'm with Jesus, it would ruin your reputation? Or I'm with Jesus, it might deny you a career opportunity. Or I'm with Jesus, it may deny you the love of your life. See, Peter's not such a bad guy for denying Jesus because these insecurities live in all of us. And the older we get, the more we have a bank of memories of where we've denied Jesus. I think one of the solutions is that we do a lot more thinking about the life that's on the other side of death. Because it puts life now into perspective. It puts life now into perspective. You see, when I do that, I had this image while preparing this message. Have you ever seen, like in a big shopping center, or when there's a big crowd and a little kid, and they get a bit overwhelmed with everything, and they just hold on to their dad's legs? And the dad wants to move a little bit, and the kid's like, don't you go far from me, I'm holding on to you. And then we read the scriptures, and Jesus says, like, you've got to come to the Father as a little child does. Because we understand there's something about the little child that understands that actually my safety is not in some mass of people. My safety is in this person, Jesus, or my safety is in my Father, my earthly Father. Like, that's my safety. That's the only one that I know that is secure. And so the closer I stick to him, the safer I am. Not the further I'm away from him, the safer I am. And yet somehow, as we get older, this distortion kicks in. This is what sin does. It separates and it isolates. This distortion kicks in where we convince ourselves that we are safer, sometimes, in certain situations, the further away from Jesus we are. And I think Peter's lesson, life lesson here, teaches us, no, let's be like those little kids that hold on to their daddy's legs for all their strength in that moment. The second denial that Peter does is he says, there's another person that says this, you were also with them, talking about the community of disciples. So the first one says, you were with him, Jesus. The second one says, you are part of them. And I think the second denial is this, that Peter denies being a part of the community of Jesus followers. So can you imagine in that moment being Peter? He's denied the person he's following, and he's denied all his friends that he's walked with for 3 years. Have we ever been in a position where we've been confronted with that? Like, oh, you go to church? You believe in that stuff? That's stupid. That's crazy. What's the church ever going to do for you? And then under peer pressure, or then under whatever pressure, or then, under work pressure, we make a denial because there's been a little bit of distance that's been created over time. We have to fight against distance, friends. What Peter was trying to do in this moment, I think, was he was standing around the fire, and I want to give Peter his credit here. He wanted to be in proximity to Jesus, but at a comfortable distance where he didn't feel unsafe. So kudos to Peter, because there was no one else there. But he's now around this fire pit with a group of people, and he doesn't want to be shunned by this group of people, so he's under pressure to belong here by saying no to all of that. I don't know what was going on in Peter's heart, but sometimes we think, they'll never find out. And so here, because I'm here and I'm in person here, because remember, they didn't have social media in those days, so no one was taking a selfie. But he's talking around the fire here, and he's like, okay, those guys are never going to find out. So, no, I'm not one of them. I'm with you guys. How aware have we found ourselves in a position where we've been at risk to deny the church, to deny the believing community, to deny knowing in the world's eyes the weirdo that sits next to me on a Sunday? On my left, not my right. For those that are in the back row that can't necessarily see, I was talking about John, not my wife, Jax. Where do we try to secure our own belonging rather than the community that Jesus wants to secure us in? And all of these decisions just start with a little bit of distance. We don't end up far away from Jesus. It's these micro steps that we take, and suddenly we're at a distance. And so Peter followed at a distance. He had never followed in a distance since Jesus called him. Now he's following at a distance. Just some research, and I think John's going to go into this a little bit more for the men tomorrow night. But research has found that nominal Christian men, so that's people that claim or profess Christianity, but actually they're at a distance. Nominal Christian men have the highest rates of divorce and domestic violence, even higher than secular men or men that do not profess to follow Jesus. So following at a distance is more dangerous than not following at all, statistically. And so Peter makes this mistake of following at a distance. The second thing we see is that distance leads to disappointment. Distance leads to disappointment. There's this moment. Can you imagine in that moment? You've just denied Jesus. You've just denied his community. You denied Jesus again. The rooster crows, and Jesus looks at him. I can't even imagine what Peter must have felt in that moment. And I do not for 1 second believe that Jesus was looking angrily at Peter. I think Jesus was looking so compassionately at him, because I think in that moment I think everything in Jesus wanted to run from where he was to go and give Peter a hug and say, it's okay. But he couldn't. And so Peter had to live with this disappointment. He had to live with the shame of his denial for a number of days. And I think Jesus was so compassionately looking at him. And I think if it weren't dark, I think Peter would have been able to see the love in Jesus' eyes. But under firelight or under candlelight, that probably wasn't possible. And so he lives with the disappointment. Why do we say that? Because that scripture ends with, he went outside and he wept bitterly. That bitterness, that pain of the soul, because he had allowed some distance to come between him and Jesus. This guy that had transformed his life. This guy that had healed his mother. This guy that he had seen speak creation into being. Distance leads to disappointment. A really silly example, but maybe something that we can understand is, I used to, many years ago, do a little bit of canoeing. down a river, and there's a big race here in South Africa called the Doozy here in Durban. It ends here. It starts in Maritzburg and ends at Blue Lagoon. And I've fortunately married into a family. Jackie's cousin was the world marathon champion and multiple Doozy winner. And so upon occasion on family holidays, I would get to train with him. The problem was I was always at a distance because he was just that much better than me. But occasionally he would humor me and he would be gracious and he would allow me to follow closely. And so when we were doing what we had called Doozy tripping, so you're kind of checking the river before you go and do the race, he would allow me, he just says, "Hey, Rich, stick close to me and you'll get through a rapid that I've broken my boat on I don't know how many times in the past. I didn't hit one rock. Not one rock going behind Ant." I'm like, "Ant, why do you see what I can't see? How do you navigate your way through this?" He's just like, "Well, I know my way through." And then we would go and we'd get to the bottom of the rapid, then we'd go to the top. And then we'd go to the bottom of the rapid, we'd go to the top. And then he says, "Okay, now I'm going to go. Wait till I get to the bottom, and now you go." He gets down to the bottom. He doesn't touch a rock. I then go. I break my boat. Because at a distance doesn't work. At a distance leads to disappointment and expense. So I had to fix my boat. At a distance, things don't work. And it leads to disappointment. It leads to a leak in the boat, at best. It leads to a broken boat, at worst. It leads to a leak in our life if we don't follow Jesus closely, because we hit every rock on the way down or on the way up, whichever way we're going. We hit every rock if we don't follow closely. Don't know if you've ever had the privilege of being in one of those like in the Berg area and in one of the rivers. I remember when our kids were younger, we would head up there and you'd say to the kids, "Okay, we're gonna go across the river and all the rocks." And as a dad, you tend to know, not all the time, because sometimes I stand on some loose ones, but you tend to know which rocks to stand on and you get across to the other side. And the kids that are clever, they follow closely and they get across to the other side. The kids that are, they like to do things their own way. And then they end up stepping on a rock which rolls, and then they end up in the water, fully wet, in winter, in the Berg. And now I've got to go and rescue them from hypothermia. Exaggerated story. How many of us are like those kids? It's no fun following in Dad's footsteps. Surely there's another way across the river. Surely there's a better way or a more adventurous way, more fun, more exciting. That rock is so much further away. Let me make that jump come short. How many times have we done that, friends? How many times have we done that? Distance leads to disappointment. Jesus' invitation is to come follow close. Then we have this moment, this beautiful, beautiful moment. So we've got distance leads to denial, distance leads to disappointment, but proximity leads to restoration. We have this beautiful moment, and it's recorded in John chapter 21. And so Jesus goes to the cross, into the grave. Then he rises from the dead again. And I can imagine in Jesus' heart, this is my imagination of it. He's like, "I just want to get to Peter. That was left in a poor place. That guy is full of shame right now. He's full of disappointment. I've got to get to Peter. I've got to get to Peter. I've got to get to Peter." And then he does. And it's recorded in John chapter 21. And look how beautiful this is. From verse 15 to 19. I'm not going to read every verse. I put the selected verses up on the screen. When they had finished eating. So what Jesus does, the precursor to this is Jesus, Peter has gone out and he's gone fishing again. Like he's given up on himself. My denial has led to such great disappointment, I've given up on myself. And he's back to fishing, which Jesus called them out of. And then they're all out fishing, and Jesus comes to the beach, and he lights a fire, and he puts some fish on the braai, we're not having a fish braai. We're having a red meat braai tomorrow night. But he puts some fish on the braai, and then he invites Peter to come and sit. And this is where we pick up the story. When they had finished eating, Jesus said to Simon Peter, "Simon, son of John, do you love me more than these, the fish? Do you love me more than this fishing?" "Yes, Lord," he said, "you know that I love you." Jesus says, "Feed my lambs." Skip down a verse. The third time he said to him, "Simon, son of John, do you love me?" Peter was hurt now because Jesus asked him a third time, "Do you love me?" And he said, "Lord, you know all things. You know that I love you." And Jesus said, "Feed my sheep." And then we go to the end of that, and it says, "Then Jesus said to him, 'Follow me. Follow me.'" And so we have this beautiful encounter where Jesus has gone through all he's gone through. He's only been able to look at Peter prior to his crucifixion, and Peter weeps bitterly. And then Jesus comes, and at one of his first opportunities, he gathers Peter around a fire, the same place that he went and denied Jesus. He comes and restores Peter. Around the same thing, around the fire. And so he pulls Peter in, and he says, "Do you love me?" "Yes, yes, yes." "Great. Feed my sheep. Continue to do the purposes. I called you out of fishing so that you could fish for men. Feed them. Feed people. Don't disappoint yourself." There was an appointment made by Jesus over Peter's life. There was an appointment made to preach the gospel, to know Jesus, to follow him closely, to be one of the apostles that would plant churches. There was an appointment made, but because Peter started following at a distance and made his own denial and was left disappointed, he disappointed himself. He took away his appointment and he went back to fishing. And Jesus comes and reappoints him, reinstates him at the first opportunity and says, "Peter, do you love me more than these?" "Yes, Jesus, you know." "Well, then don't disappoint yourself. Reappoint yourself, because I've called you to be a preacher of the gospel." And Jesus today would say to you, if you have denied him, if you've walked away from him, if you're walking at a distance from him, don't disappoint yourself. Because Jesus wants to reappoint you this morning. And it's so beautiful. He does two things, Jesus, here, to undo the mess that Peter got himself in from following at a distance. The first is this: he builds it around a fire. That is not insignificant, friends. Because too often what we do is we want to run away from the very source of our shame. We want to run away from the things that caused us pain. We want to run away from that trauma or from that denial or from whatever it is. But Jesus says, no, let's go to that source and let's rewrite that story. Let's redeem that story. It was at a fireplace that you denied me. It's at a fireplace you're going to be reinstated. And so, friends, if you've got trauma in your past, if you've got denial in your past, you've got things in your past, stop running away from it, because Jesus in that place is going to redeem you. And he gets to rewrite the story. Imagine that didn't take place. Every time Peter was around a fire, he would have lived with shame. But now, every time he's around a fire, he gets to live with the reappointment of Jesus. Let Jesus reappoint you. Let Jesus rewrite the story for you. And the second thing that Jesus does is he does it in front of his mates. Because the disciples are there, if you read the story. And so he's having his fish braai with his mates. And I believe that Jesus does that for two reasons. One, he does it for Peter's sake. Because Jesus could have just gone to Peter quietly. But then there could have been a moment a year down the line, and Peter starts questioning whether that reappointment was real. And so forever, the community of the disciples were able to go to Peter and say, "I was there. I heard Jesus reappoint you. I heard him. Peter, you can do this. Peter, don't step back. Don't disappoint yourself. I was there." And so today, I'm telling you now, in 2 or 3 minutes' time, we're going to have a reappointment time. And you're going to do it in front of the community so the community can say, "I was there for your sake." And then the second reason I believe that Jesus did it in front of the mates was for the mates' sake. Because they could have been thinking, "Jeez, he denied being a part of us." And then Peter rocks up and says, "No, Jesus has reappointed me." Did we see that? But Jesus does it in front of the friends so that the friends can know that Jesus has reappointed Peter. And so Jesus is so redemptive in this moment. So redemptive. And so his invitation to all of us is that redeeming story, that where we've walked at a distance, where it's led to denying him, whether it be in our heart, whether it be in our mind, whether it be in our bodies, whether it be in our actions, when we've denied his way, Jesus is saying, come back. This is the beauty of what Jesus does, because Jesus doesn't just encourage us to go to the source of the pain. He went to the source of the pain. So it was at the tree in the Garden of Eden that all of humanity came unstuck. And so what does Jesus do? He goes to the Garden of Gethsemane and he undoes it. In the Garden of Eden, Adam says, "Not your way, but my way." And in the Garden of Gethsemane, Jesus says, "Not my way, but your way." He reverses it. And then it goes on even a little bit more, because Adam gets to eat from the fruit of that tree when he says, "My way, not your way." So he eats the fruit of the tree, but the invitation of Jesus is, will you eat from the fruit of the tree, the cross? Will you eat from the fruit of my life? I am the bread of life. So don't eat from the tree of my way, eat from the tree of your way, God. It has different fruit. One leads to death, one leads to life. So Jesus doesn't just invite us to go to the source of our pain, he's gone there first. So he's saying, follow me. And follow me close. Hold on to me like a little kid, because I'm telling you, you're going to step across the rocks and you're going to get across to the other side without getting wet and hypothermia. You're going to get down the river without putting a hole in your boat or breaking it. You're going to do whichever example you want to use. Jesus is the way through death to life. And he wants you. And he's looking with compassion upon you. And the distance that you've created with him, he hasn't created it. The distance you've created with him, he's looking at you with compassionate eyes and he's saying, come, come, come follow me. I'm appointing you, I'm reappointing you into the story that I've written from before time. This morning, I want to invite you on behalf of Jesus to come and stand around the proverbial fireplace so that Jesus can reappoint you. And it's going to take courage because there's people here. But I believe that if you can do it in front of a room full of people, the Spirit of God is going to work a work so deep inside of you that your reappointment will not be undone by your own disappointment. And so if you're sitting in this room and you have allowed distance to come between you and Jesus, and it's led to disappointment, maybe it wasn't full-blown denial, but it's just disappointment. Today, would you come to the front and allow Jesus to reappoint you around this proverbial fire here in this community of believers? I'm going to invite you to come forward.